of Education for Tuesday, March 5th, 2019. Please rise for the flag salute. Thank you. Notice of the meeting, please.
I hereby make this statement to indicate compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, known as Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of New Jersey, 1975, which became effective 90 days after enactment, January 19, 1976. Notice of this meeting was given by providing the location, time, and date of this meeting and posting of the same on the front door of the Board of Education offices, by delivering copies to the Borough Hall and the Metuchen Public Library, the Home News and Tribune, the Criterion Sentinel, the Star Ledger, and by filing a copy with the Borough Clerk as prescribed by this law.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Benderly?
Here.
Ms. Cook?
Here.
Mr. Derflinger?
Here.
Mr. Glassberg?
Here.
Ms. Colleen?
Here.
Mr. Lifton?
Here.
Mr. Manley?
Here.
Mr. Small?
Here.
Mr. Suss?
Here.
100% attendance. Dr. Caputo, a showcase of success this evening?
We do. We have a number of high school students with us tonight, and they'll give us a preview of the ensemble. I'll invite Misty Simone to do a little more of an introduction, and we'll invite our students up to the stage for our first ensemble preview up on our stage. So, Misty Simone.
Good evening. Ensemble night, which is tomorrow at 7 p.m., begins in the auditorium with the chorus, the jazz band, the Vivaldi Strings Ensemble, plus duos, solos, and student-led smaller groups. The audience will then move to the gym to see and hear the Winter Guard and the Percussion Ensemble. Tonight, the Vivaldi String Ensemble will preview this event. Under the direction of Elizabeth Sato, they will play the Korean folk song variants. Mrs. Sato?
Wow, that was amazing.
Incredible.
I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I really like doing this here. The acoustics are phenomenal. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ms.
I guess, again, tomorrow, what time, do you know, Dr. Caputo, or
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock?
7 o'clock tomorrow night.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the meeting to the public for any topic. Please come to the mic and state your address. Seeing none, I'll close that portion of the meeting. Dr. Caputo, presentations and discussions. I know we have some budget presentations.
We do. If it's okay, we'll start with special education tonight.
That's great, thank you.
Excellent.
Dr. Herzog, come on down.
Good evening. Glad we had that relaxing performance before I present the special education budget. We planned that on purpose. Okay. Well, thank you for having me here this evening. I'll be taking this time to walk you through the special education budget and the supports and services provided by these funds. Specifically, I'll speak about the fiscal allocations throughout the department, tuition for out-of-district placements, identified needs for program development, and celebration of recent successes. There are currently 389 students with disabilities in our district, which represents approximately 17% of our student population, and the needs of this group are represented in this budget. I'll begin with handout number 1, which you have, and that is the supply lines. The supply lines on this chart reflect teacher supplies, office supplies, texts, online subscriptions, supplemental instructional materials, assistive technology devices, assessment tools for child study team and speech therapists, nursing supplies, and in-service expenses. You'll see that the textbook line shows a slight increase, and that reflects the addition of some supplemental materials for special education teachers. This is primarily multisensory reading program materials for students with reading disabilities, leveled text, and audio text. Additionally, I'll share that we had a multi-year grant for Learning Ally, which is a database for audiobooks, and that was terminated by state budget cuts, so that was taken over by local funds. There was also a slight increase for speech supplies, and that is because we have more speech therapists in our district that are now district employees versus contracted from outside agencies. Next, I'll focus you on the direct specialized services provided to students with disabilities reflected in these handouts, and this is the purchasing technical services lines and the tuition lines. These lines have showed an increase in order to address the needs of our students with disabilities. First, I'll explain a little bit about what the purchasing technical services line includes. There are 2 accounts of this type. One is for preschool and kindergarten, and the other is grades 1st through 12th. And these lines reflect the services of the direct services of contracted providers, so such as occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, behavior analysis, teacher of the deaf services, and nursing services. Also included in this line of purchasing technical services is the evaluation costs and consultation fees conducted by outside specialists who are not directly employed by the district. This includes psychiatrists, neurologists, bilingual evaluators, assistive technology specialists, and alternative augmentative communication experts and other specialists as needed. These evaluations are provided when determining eligibility for students with disabilities or specific programming needs. And our students and our staff benefit from these services when we need to bring in outside expertise that we might not have in our district. The increase in these lines reflect an increase in direct related services from these providers, particularly in the area of speech and language specialists this year and specialized nursing. This also reflects consultations with assistive technology specialists and specialists in unique communication disorders. Working closely with these specialists helps our students and our staff. It provides embedded professional development and helps our staff gain additional areas of expertise while also addressing the student needs. Now I'll move on to out-of-district tuitions. The tuitions are summarized on handout 1 in some of the lines and in more detail on handout 2. This is the largest expense in the department other than staff salaries. These are programs that the district places students in when their needs cannot be addressed in district. These schools often specialize in disabling conditions and special instructional approaches to meet those needs. It's difficult each year to project exactly how many out-of-district placements we're going to need and exact tuition. These vary from year to year as students move in, students move out, and students' needs evolve and change throughout the year. There are other factors that affect this as well, such as legal proceedings, due process, and things like that. The amount of students placed out of district has remained fairly consistent over the last few years, but there is a significant increase in projected tuition. That is because there is a significant increase in our private school tuitions, which we have no control over each year, and there are also some higher tuition placements now that we have projected. Okay, in order to avoid a significant increase in out-of-district tuition, we would really have to decrease the number of students who are in out-of-district placements, and that can only be done by developing high-quality programs in district. In the past, a large number of students were placed out of district to participate in 18 to 21-year-old programming to prepare for transition to adulthood. In fact, this group currently accounts for 20% of our out-of-district students. So I am excited in this budget to present for the board's consideration a proposal to provide 18 to 21-year-old programming within our own district. The addition of this programming is good for kids, it's good for families, and it will make our community stronger and a more inclusive one. It also makes sense fiscally for long-term planning, especially when thinking about the current students in district in our self-contained classes and as they get older. In analyzing the most common reasons why students are being recommended for out-of-district placements over the last 2 years, 2 particular areas stand out. Those areas are language impairments and mental health. Significantly language-impaired students require the intervention of speech and language specialists with an expertise in multiple methods of communication, oral motor development, and assistive technology. For this reason, this budget includes more resources devoted to this need and a commitment to enhance programming in this area. The increasing amount of students presenting with mental health-related concerns is causing a crisis within public schools all over. And in Metuchen, we are seeing an impact of this trend within our own school buildings and in our budgeting for out-of-district placements. In the past 2 years, 5 students were placed out of district for therapeutic services, and at least 4 more students have been identified with similar needs. On a daily basis, our child study team, our school counselors, and our nurses are challenged with providing intensive services to students struggling with very serious issues like depression, anxiety, school avoidance, and sadly, threats of self-harm. They do this while managing the needs of all of the other students in our schools and on their caseload. These are very serious issues, and our current framework of support staff simply cannot provide for the level of intervention these students require. This is resulting in a spike in special education referrals and recommendations for therapeutic out-of-district placements at a rate we frankly cannot sustain. I must share, though, that this is not just a Metuchen dilemma, and this is not actually just a special education issue. Many of the students I'm referring to are high-achieving academically and benefit tremendously from participating in mainstream classes with appropriate support and alongside their peers. While this proposed budget plans for out-of-district therapeutic placements for specific students, relying solely on out-of-district placements to address the needs of this student population is not a sufficient long-term solution for us. The urgent need to devote additional supports to the area of mental health impacts this out-of-district budget and cannot be overlooked as we continue in our long-term planning. I do anticipate that at the end of this presentation, a member of the board may ask me what I would add to this budget if the means were available.
That's not fair.
So I'll take this moment and answer that question now. Many of our neighboring districts are responding to similar issues with creative programming by partnering with mental health agencies to provide therapeutic programs within their own schools for both classified and non-classified students. I would love to be a part of the problem-solving team to explore and present viable solutions with a systematic district-wide plan to address these significant needs. Okay. Now that I've explained the budgetary allocations and I've identified the areas in need of program development, I'd like to highlight some of the positive work accomplished from the resources in the current budget and anticipated for the upcoming year. While I will only focus on some of the changes, I do want to acknowledge that there are great interventions taking place in every classroom, and I want to thank the teaching and support staff for their dedication to meeting the needs of all students. First, I'll share some general program enhancements. We are now completely transitioned to a new special education data management IEP system, which has greatly improved compliance, efficiency, and quality of reporting. We have expanded and intensified our teacher training in multisensory reading intervention. Through a partnership with Fairleigh Dickinson University and the use of IDEA grant funds, 5 special educators at Campbell are enrolled in a 2-year graduate program to become Orton Gillingham certified. Excitingly, a general education teacher also enrolled herself in that program. As an added benefit, select students are receiving tutoring services as part of the teacher training practicum component. Additionally, the new elementary special education teachers receive training in Wilson reading systems, and all special educators in the district receive training in assistive technology for reading disabilities, and we expanded the use of audio text resources from Learning Ally. Special education teachers preschool through high school continue to embed social emotional learning, decision-making, and problem-solving into their daily academic instruction. Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for your leadership with that. I'm excited to see that while students are receiving their special education programs to address their skill deficits, they're also learning essential critical thinking and life skills. Next, I'll speak about our focus on the inclusion of students with disabilities at all levels. Our integrated preschool continues to provide an outstanding program where typically developing peers and students with developmental delays learn side by side. All students in that program benefit from a state-approved curriculum, certified teachers, paraprofessionals, and a team who prepares them for kindergarten readiness. Any parents who are interested in having their child enrolled in that program should contact Moss School for more information. Our commitment to developing our in-class resource program has continued. We now have co-teaching teams at all grade levels at Campbell, Edgar, and Metuchen High School, and all co-teachers have received training throughout the year on collaborative teaching models. Additionally, the New Jersey Coalition for Inclusive Education worked with select staff at Campbell to support the inclusion of students with more significant disabilities. We have added unified programming at Metuchen High School, including a unified physical education class, a unified club, and unified school-wide activities, where typically developing students learn side by side with students with developmental disabilities by engaging in authentic, inclusive experiences. This includes team building, fitness activities, bowling trips, and planning for disability awareness activities throughout the building, the district, and the community. I'm thrilled to share that 30 students just interviewed for the opportunity to participate in the Unified Physical Education elective. Additionally, the excitement among staff has spread from Metuchen High School to Moss School as Moss is preparing to introduce the Special Olympics Inclusive Young Athletes program next year. Now I'll share our continued work on transition planning. Our self-contained classes for students with developmental delays now extends from preschool through high school. Through collaborative teacher inquiries, the staff meets regularly to review best practices in curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Social programming has focused on ensuring students have meaningful opportunities to interact with their non-disabled peers. The teachers are formally trained to provide carefully planned and well-supervised community trips focused on teaching leisure, recreation, and functional skills outside of the school setting. Families are offered monthly home visits for collaboration and parent training to help students generalize across settings. As mentioned before, enhancing speech and language services is our next focus for this group. We have partnered with Rutgers University and local community businesses to improve our transition programming for students ages 16 to 18 through the Metuchen Internship Learning Experience course, the MILE course. 2 teachers are now formally trained in structured learning experiences from Rutgers, and all high school paraprofessionals have been trained by the Boggs Center as job coaches. Students are job sampling in town at places such as the YMCA, the Metuchen Diner, What's the Scoop, Abilities, and the list grows daily. We're so appreciative of the support from our local business owners. As I noted earlier, we developed a proposal to add transition programming to assist students with developmental disabilities ages 18 to 21 with their transition to post-secondary settings. This proposal was developed after participating in relevant professional development, reviewing professional literature, visiting other programs, and collaborating with staff in other districts. The overall goal of this program is to help students gain the necessary skills for increases in independence and success in the next phase of their life. In partnership with community businesses and district-sponsored programs, students would participate in authentic vocational experiences while supported with job coaches to acquire the skills they need for meaningful employment. Students would be connected to community agencies which provide post-high school support in areas related to their personal goals. I'm excited about the interest and support to date by the community stakeholders that we have spoken with so far. This proposal includes a special education teacher, a transition coordinator, job coaches, and plan for community-based fitness. This program brings incredible promise for our students and completes a continuum of services in our district for students ages 3 to 21. If implemented, the funds would be redistributed accordingly from tuition lines to support the program in district. In handout number 3, Mr. Harvier has nicely outlined the costs of the proposal over the next few years, which we can speak about in a minute. So I will now conclude by thanking all of the parents, the community, and staff members who contribute to the daily success of the special education programs. I'd like to especially thank the Special Education Parent Advisory Council leadership team of both parents and teachers, and the Special Education District leadership team for their ongoing guidance and support. The time and effort they devote to improving our department is truly appreciated, and their input has been essential in the development of these priorities and in this budget. I'd also like to thank Dr. Caputo, Mr. Harvier, Mr. Cohn, and the entire Board of Education for your ongoing support, which I have truly felt throughout the year, which has allowed me to help focus on these areas. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the effort and the what you wrote and presented. I'm really happy that you're part of this district and that you're here doing this and taking the program to another level. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Small, I saw you had a question.
Thank you. So for starters, thank you. Very nice job on the presentation, and you've gotten up to speed very quickly in a short period of time. And from my vantage point, you have the hardest job from a budgetary perspective, obviously, with the support of the folks to my right, because the vast majority of this budget we can't directly control, and it's extremely difficult to forecast or project. So appreciate all the rigor and creative ways that you've looked at how to approach this for the next year.
Thank you.
I have one question
Sure.
on the numbers, and I should know this because I've seen the numbers prior to this evening, but I'm drawing a blank, and then I have just a couple of very brief comments. So on handout number 3, the 18 to 21-year-old program, I can't remember why in year 2 the cost avoidance in the budget number drops and then goes back up again from the year 1.
2021, we're only projecting 2 students in the class. If we have more students, if we get tuition students, that obviously will decrease.
So projections drop and then go up
Right,
again based
right.
on what we're seeing.
Right,
Obviously, that
so
could
the-
change, but
the-
that's the assumption.
Right, and the number of students is on this line down here.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
But Mr. Harvey, if I can add, I remember we talked about if we can't put, you didn't put it into here, but there is a possibility that if we do only have 2 students, that we could open up other districts that don't provide this, and we could get some revenue as a result of adding a couple of students at that time, right?
Yeah, if that were in the budget, and this were approved, I would charge Dr. Herzog with looking at that second year out to bring some students in, if that were possible.
Yeah.
Great point. And then just some, actually, one more question and then a couple of comments. I don't have the enrollment with me tonight, but how many students are currently enrolled? You said 328, I think, is in the projection for next year?
How many students with disabilities in the district?
Yeah.
389 right now.
389.
17% population.
Yeah,
Okay.
just under 17%, yeah.
Okay. And then just my closing comment is really just an observation, and it's for the public and for the rest of the board, although I think we're all pretty cognizant of this, and that is, so this budget is projected to go up about 10% from the current year. As we've talked about, Mr. Manley and a number of us at a few of the more recent board meetings were capped at 2%. This budget makes up about 9% of our total district spending, and it's going up at a 10% rate. Roughly 75% of our entire school district budget is salaries and benefits for staff. Salaries obviously are contractual and going up at over 3%, and benefits, which is a pretty big sum of money, is probably going to go up close to 15%. So and I think Mr. Manley at the last meeting highlighted this, but we're going to have some very difficult decisions when we haven't gotten state aid yet, but in the coming weeks as we present, I think it's on the 18th or 19th, we have to present the budget that we would vote on. And so this is going to be a challenging year, to say the least. The last time we had this much of a challenge is when we lost all of our state aid about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago.
10, yeah.
So thank you very much. That's
Thank
it.
you, Mr. Small. Mr. Glassberg?
Thank you for the presentation. Very thorough. Thank you for your efforts in developing as you said, wanting to develop a high-quality in-district program. So a couple different questions regarding the potential mental health partnerships. What might that look like, the partnership,
Okay.
if we were to have one?
Sure. Well, I guess what I'll speak about are the examples that I know that I'm most familiar with from neighboring districts and colleagues and hearing from different agencies. There are 3 agencies that do this in a lot of districts in New Jersey. Should I name them? Or no? I don't know. Well, okay. So, for example, if anyone wants to research them, Effective School Solutions, Rutgers University Behavioral Health Care, UBHC, Sage Thrive. Those are 3 very popular programs throughout the district. So I know that, for example, Effective School Solutions, all of these agencies bring in licensed mental health clinicians that are experienced and that are well-trained that do this. They also bring in a supervisory level, a director level, with a different level of expertise. They provide direct services in our buildings for intensive therapy, for counseling groups. They work with parents in the evenings. They do community outreach to make sure students are set up with therapists and that there's collaboration between the school staff and the private staff. So each model looks a little different, and each of the agencies will work with our staff on what are our needs, what are we looking for, how does it fit into our model best, and I would, if we were ever to go forward with this, I would absolutely seek the input of our stakeholders in what we're looking for and what would work best for our students. But essentially, it's outside consultants who become part of your staff. They're in the buildings all day. They do screenings, they deal with emergencies, and it just provides a different level of expertise and support. I'll say this, they don't take jobs away from anybody. This is not instead of any child study team or any counselors. This is supporting a need that they just can't do with all of their other responsibilities.
Thank you. And do we have reason to believe that such an agency or person might help us prevent or not need to have somebody out of district because we would be able to supply those services in district? Is there?
Yeah. I would say pretty confidently, yes. That is the whole premise of these programs and their success rate throughout the district. So I would say yes. Would it mean that no student would ever need to go out of district for mental health reasons? No. But there's got to be there's an in-between, having just counseling and a child study team who is in multiple schools and does evaluations and meetings and IEPs, and counselors who do college meetings and scheduling and support hundreds of students in the building. There are many students whose needs could be appropriately met with something in between.
And besides the 18 to 21 program and this potential program, are there other things that you could think of that might also help with the situation where we're not able to provide what students need in district?
Well, based on some of the recent out-of-district placements, I've identified communication and speech therapy expertise. Speech therapy is a very interesting discipline. It's so diverse and vast in the areas of expertise within speech therapy that a professional could know, anywhere from pragmatic language, the social nuances of language, to using a device for a nonverbal student to communicate through pictures and voice output. So there's such a wide range, and bringing in more expertise in that area, I think, is something that we need to devote some time and resources to.
And lastly, more of a statement, but I appreciate that you and the district, that we're not shying away from mental health issues, pretending that they don't exist in our schools or in Metuchen, and that we're looking to be proactive in how we handle that, both on the special ed level, regular ed level, with programs potentially like this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here.
Here, sorry. Mr. Derflinger?
Dr. Herzog, thank you very much for the presentation, and I'm comforted that our precious kids have planned out a budget for them, and I appreciate all the work that it takes. I know you highlighted developing, as Mr. Glassberg said, developing high-quality programming, which included language impairments and mental health. If you had the option of posting for a position tomorrow for something that you've identified as a common, frequent need in the area of communication, what would that look like?
In the area of communication, an expert in alternative augmentative communication,
Okay.
which is an area of speech therapy that supports our nonverbal limited communicators.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Suss?
Thank you, Dr. Herzog, for a very comprehensive presentation. I actually have a question for Mr. Small. Where did you come with the 10% number? Because the number listed here is 17.6%.
I don't recommend challenging Mr. Small's numbers.
I think his number is too small.
The athletics budget, so hold on, let me back up here.
I was hoping no one noticed that.
Oh, we all did. We were just,
Just kidding.
I assumed he was right. Mr. Suss didn't.
You're not looking at the total line items. That's just a subsection of the budget. I'm looking across both funds, 10 and 20. 2.7 million up, almost 2 3/4
So you're in
up to almost
handout-
3 1/4.
Which handout are you on?
Handout number 1. Back
Handout
to
number
page
1, so you're comparing 2.751 and the 3.227?
Correct. Not 3064 from 3604. That help?
Yes.
Good.
So I'll
You
trust.
can't.
I'll try. I'm all right. I won't do
I've
the
seen
math.
you try.
I won't do the math. Thank you, Mr. Benderly, for doing the math.
Go ahead.
So a question for Dr. Herzog. Okay. The people were asking what you would add. I guess I have to ask you the doomsday question of what you would take out.
What I would take out, it would probably have to be supplies, because can't really take out services. They're driven by IEPs. So it would have to be a bare bones supply budget.
Thank you.
I'll ask a question. So, Dr. Herzog, I know you mentioned that the number of students is relatively flat, but the cost associated, Mr. Small touched on this, but I think it's worthwhile to point out again that while we, running the public school district, are required to stick at a 2% increase, the costs associated with a number of these out-of-district placements have gone up significantly. When we don't see students listed here, we see schools and dollars, right? So it's not fair, right, to look at this and say like, oh, well, center school went from X to Y. That could be a completely different student, right, requiring different services.
Absolutely.
But is it true, though, that in general, a lot of these schools, we see 10 to 15% increases for the same service for the same student year over year?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
But yes, you're exactly right. It could be that it was different students, different services. It could have been that student was at that school for half of the year, and now they're projected for a full year. It could be that they didn't go to their extended school year, and now they're projected to. So that accounts for the variance.
Yeah, I mean, the increase in tuition to private schools is up between 25 to 30%, just doing rough math.
Yeah,
Some people don't need calculators.
it's
I'm just
crazy.
teasing you.
Some
I know,
meetings get
I
away.
know. Are there any other questions of the board, Dr. Herzog? Mr. Derfinger?
On that note, Mr. Manley, what, do you know what's attributing to the cost increase in the schools in general? Is it that they're needing to increase their staff, or is it just that in general these supplies are getting more expensive? Like, is this going to be forever, where every year it's just 25, 30? Because that's a significant increase from year to
Yeah.
year.
I'm not sure. I know that as districts are bringing in more programs, out-of-district schools have lost a lot of students. Schools have closed, and their expenses have, in order to maintain what they offer, they probably need to increase.
Okay.
But I'm not exactly sure, but that would be my guess.
I would also point out that they actually have the ability to back bill us 3-4 years later.
Right. Right.
We've gotten some pretty significant bills that we are obligated to pay that were unbudgeted, where 3-4 years down the road, they do a review of what their expenses were in the past and said, oops, it cost us more, we got less revenue because we lost a student or two that we were expecting, and they'll come back and bill us for thousands more. This year, from my perspective, the tuition rates have gone up significantly more than the past. So in the past, we've seen, where our budgets go up 2%, the tuitions were going up like 4 or 5%. This year, for the first time, I'm seeing, the tuitions are going up 10, 12%, which to me is just, kind of egregious. It was hard enough when you're doubling the increases when you're going, 5, 6 times. And, just to put a very fine point on it, our annual budget increase from the 2%, $36 million budget is about $720,000 approximately. The increase here is $540,000 out of the 720. Right, just going to to out of district kind of tuition kinds of stuff. That doesn't account our own staff that are getting well-deserved increases, and all the other costs that go up. So it's really a difficult time.
One thing that
Go ahead.
that I just want to mention with the development of programs is it's hard to sell a program when the need is urgent. Developing more programs and showing that they're successful is when you get buy-in. It's harder to say, okay, we're looking at 4 out-of-district placements, let's put a program together. It can be done, and it can be done well, and I know our staff could do it, but you don't always get the buy-in from families when you do that. So investing in programs like this, it will show its worth over time.
So speaking about over time, I thought of another question, and this may be difficult for you on the spot because I haven't asked this of anybody until it just popped into my head. But one of the things that we're looking here at a couple years out, but one of the things we're talking about in facilities is 5, 10, 15 years out, right? And we're looking about building spaces. And one of the things that we talked about in facilities when we talked about this school in particular was if we're going to add space here, thinking through building adequate spaces for special needs programming. I know you've only been here 2 years, and I know we found a room here for the 18 to 21-year-old program, which was a collaborative effort by building staff, you, administration. And maybe Dr. Caputo and Mr. Harvey can comment on this too, because you have more history on this. But what spaces have we consumed, for special, and I'm not saying it's the wrong thing, but have we used for special education that maybe we didn't in the past? Because while the out-of-district placements have remained rather level, that 17%, that 389 has been growing over time. And we have had to use more space for these purposes. So either one of you comment on that and what our needs might be going out as we think through trying to bring some of this stuff back in.
Well, so recent increase in what we call in-class resources, the collaborative teaching. So that's not needed any space, and that's a great benefit of that program.
Yep.
We have very few self-contained classes, pretty much one at each level. Preschool has a little more, but pretty much one at each school. So that's really it, other than replacement classes, which there's not an enormous amount of. So I don't think that special education needs has made a huge impact on facilities. Looking forward, 18 to 21 would need a room. Ideally, they'll be out in the community more than not, and taking advantage of our township resources, so that's great. We'd probably be looking at using maybe like the foods room, which is a beautiful room, even if we just had access a little bit here or there during a free period, there would be no need to recreate. It's a beautiful room for that purpose. If we were to have a mental health program in any of our schools, we would need private counseling space and enough space for groups. That would be a need that we'd have to look at.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, do you have any additional comments, like over time? I mean, it's...
So Dr. Herzog and Mr. Harvey and myself, when we tour the buildings together, we're always looking at the spaces that are currently being used. We're always working with the principals to determine what spaces we would have to take back, and in an ideal world, the kinds of spaces that we would like for these programs. We want to make sure that, because we know we have the equal to, or we have better than, or at least equal to teaching staff, we want to make sure our spaces and our experience can match any program that's out there. And you can see the cost here. If we can do it for much more reasonable cost, and the big bonus is we know our teachers and we know the programs, and we're able to keep these kids in our district with their peers, their brothers, their sisters, their neighbors. So yeah, Dr. Herzog's always got her eye on different rooms and different spaces and what ideally we'd like to have in a perfect situation. And you know, we're working towards that.
Yeah, I remember when we had the facilities meeting, I was moved by what what Mr. Robbins had said about, you know, making sure we thought about space for mental health programming. So as we begin to develop a program and think about the teachers and the needs and the types of services we want to have, that spaces, you know, would be important as well, right? Having the ability to have, you know, a student be able to have a room that doesn't, you know, it's kind of off the room, right? So they don't leave a room, but they can get that kind of space they might need to de-escalate a situation, right? Things that are, you know, it's functionally more operational for a teacher or a mental health professional that's trying to provide a service, right?
Like a waiting area,
Right.
if somebody's busy and not being centrally located.
Right.
You don't want it to be
Privacy,
a fishbowl
right.
issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I don't have any other questions, so thank you so much, Dr. Herzog. Really
Okay.
appreciate you being
Thank
here
you,
and the work that you're
everybody.
doing. It's great.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Herzog. Next, move to athletics, Mr. Cathcart.
Good evening. The budget that we presented to you, as you see in the handout, covers 21 varsity sports, which totals 46 teams, sub-varsity, freshmen, and 11 middle school sports. They run a gamut from everything from busing to medical supplies, officials, coaches, and supplies that our teams need. Pretty much everything that you have in there is itemized. It gives you an idea of what we spend on our teams, on our coaches, and on our buses. So we've tried to keep this pretty much at the same level it was last year, but as you know, everything increases, whether it happens to be equipment or uniforms. And for each team, we try to do a cycle where we have 3 or 4 or 5 teams, depending on a need. We rotate them by a 2 or 3 year basis to redo our uniforms. So that's what you're actually looking at right now. I'm trying to keep it short.
Thank you. Mr. Small, questions?
Just one quick question, and I should remember this, but I can't. Was the cheerleading coaching stipend, was that new this year?
No, so a couple of years back, what we did, we split out the coaching stipend into seasons because we were finding we were appointing a coach, and for a couple of years there, we didn't have a winter season. So then we'd have to rescind part of the salary. So what we did a few years back, we split out the fall season and the winter season. And then, so on the, so on our handout number 5, no, I'm sorry, handout number 6, we listed 22, those are 22 cheerleaders in the fall, 12 cheerleaders in the winter. That's why we had the 2 numbers there for cheering.
Okay, thank
So
you.
she gets 2 stipends, one for fall season, and if the winter season runs, a separate stipend for the winter season.
Okay, thank you.
Is that the athlete list there, is that for fall then, there's 2 numbers?
So, yeah, so it's a mixed list. Mr. Cathcart, can you tell us a little bit how you gave us the numbers for that list?
How I'm sorry, say
How
that?
the numbers, the athlete numbers, some are current numbers based on this season?
Yes.
Some are projected for next season?
Winter and fall numbers are this year. Spring are last year's. They're a little bit different this year. We have a larger class that came in, so you're going to have a lot more freshmen for our varsity teams in the spring. What you're looking at is last year's numbers. Our varsity rosters or preseason rosters are just coming in now, so we're going over all the medical forms, whether it's impact, physicals, and all the other different forms that the kids have to fill out. And at that point, then we'll have a general idea of how many we have. But we really try not to project too far into the spring till somewhere around the beginning of April, when the teams tend to level out and we have a better idea of how many kids we have. So what you're really looking at is last year's spring's numbers and this year's fall and winter.
I have one question on the number of athletes. There's 53 players of golf?
Yeah.
When I was there, we had like 6 or 8, so that's,
Yeah,
to me, it's
it
a
seems to
huge
be
number.
a growing sport. It's a large number, and again, this is a preliminary number. We do have a large number of kids that go out for the team. As you know, there's only a certain amount of kids that actually score.
Right.
So realistically, we have them practicing. A lot of the freshmen that come out, and very rarely do they actually score along with the varsity kids that are usually the juniors and seniors. We try to avoid any kind of cuts because down the road you don't know of how many of these freshmen and sophomores are going to turn into very good golfers. They could. So, we try to avoid cuts as it is. The only time we actually really have a cut of varsity sport tends to be the winter season. We're limited in space.
Right.
But as far as fall and spring goes, we try to keep all of our kids active at all times.
And that's co-ed too, boys and girls.
Yeah, no, I did know that, which is amazing and great. We have a dedicated, it used to be co-ed, but now it's actually a girls team and a boys team, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the state divided it about, I'm going to say 3 years ago, because there had been so many girls out for golf. And believe it or not, there's a lot of college money in girls golf at this point.
Field hockey and golf are the most,
Yes.
the 2 most
That's correct.
female sports left with money on the table. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Suss?
So I have to ask you the standard questions. So what would you add? Well, I went positive first. I could have started negative.
Did I hit the mega millions or a scratch off? I just need to know how much I can spend.
I think scratch off is probably.
If I were going to add anything, I would add something that would increase our participation, whether it is a new team, whether it is an additional level of an existing team, whatever it happens to be, that's where I would go. I would try to do that just because I want to keep the numbers as high as we possibly can. We usually have anywhere from about 45% of our athletes at the high school, or our students at the high school, that are involved in our athletics. So if I could increase that, I would do that.
And what would you cut?
Nothing. What would I cut? How much time do I have to think about that?
As much time as it takes to do the scratch off?
I can tell you, I would try to, whatever I cut would not affect participation. I honestly don't know. I'd have to really look at our budget to to figure that out. But again, I would not want to see any of our kids subjected to the fact that they can't participate in a sport, whatever it happened to be. So I really don't know the answer to that without really sitting down with Mr. Harvier and probably crunching those numbers.
I have a question. I noticed that there is no funding for ice hockey. Could you explain the thinking behind why that's not on the budget?
Well, as you know, when ice hockey was first brought into the district, it was brought in as a co-op with Edison, and the parents were usually taking the brunt of that sport, and I know you're aware of that. Is there funding available? That's something that the board would have to decide. I have no problem funding something if I'm given the money. I have no problems in having our kids be successful in whatever sport that they choose, whether it's a co-op or one of our sports. So, that's an issue that I think has to go through a budgetary process as far as, I go.
But for your own budget preparation, you did not include it?
No, I was told, that was part of the athletic committee decision that we decided that was to be something where we would go and how we would do it.
Right. Mr. Lifton.
Looking at the largest dollar value is, of course, football, and that's always has been as traditional. I'm sorry. I'll repeat since I don't think I was heard. Looking at the actual dollars, the total dollars, the most expensive sport, it always has been and it continues to be, is football. But the number of athletes that are playing football is dropping. You have projected 26 student athletes playing football. How does that compare to prior years' students?
Well, the numbers across the nation in football have dropped, as you know. And I'm sure you've seen all the articles. We've dropped a considerable amount in New Jersey alone. As far as the numbers go and the participation and the amount of money that's put into it, the budget is, done early in October. And when it's done, we don't know what we're going to need for the following year. At any given time, we could have 10 or 12 helmets rejected. Helmets are anywhere from $250 to about $350. So when we project this, we're just kind of get an idea of where we're going with it. That money can be allocated to any other sport. As last year we had a problem with field hockey goals, we had to replace those, so we kind of dragged it from different sports to replace the field hockey goals. We did the same thing with soccer goals this year. Because the soccer goals, we had some issues with that. So the money is kind of placed in certain spots early in the year, and we don't actually know exactly where we're going to need it until later on in the year, but because we have to do it early, we do it that way. But as far as numbers in football, we're hoping that a new staff, a new head coach will bring those numbers back up. In years past, we've had as many as 60 kids. Would I like to see that? Yeah, I would. In my hometown, we have 80, 85 kids on the sidelines, and I'd like to see that again. I don't know where this is going to go. Football in small schools has gone, pretty much south in some of the schools. But I can think that, like anything else, there's a pendulum, and it's going to swing back. And when it does, I think we want to be in the forefront of that.
Okay, the number of football coaches is listed at 5. Is that the number that we've had over many years? Is that more or less? Yeah,
as long as I've been here, and I'm sure before that, there has been that number, 5. We just started doing a survey throughout the GMC and actually throughout the entire state. There's an AD internet that we kind of send out emails to, and I've been collecting the teams, some of the larger schools, some of the smaller schools. The smallest number there is 5. The largest number is 11. Of course, that's the bigger schools, obviously. So it kind of varies, but 5 is usually the number for the Group 1 and Group 2s. Group 2s, the bigger ones tend to have 7 or 8, which is where we're headed right now into the Group 2s. How long we'll be there is another story. I don't know, but that's pretty much where our coaching staff has been.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions.
It's really the same, it's not a question, I guess, it's a statement, but it's the same thing that Mr. Lifton just said jumped out at me, which is, that potentially 26 students and five coaches, which is also double the number of most of the other sports that are listed. It seems like a lot. The field is big, I guess, but it seems like a lot for the number of students that we have.
Well, I think the issue becomes the moving parts and the different positions and the offenses and defenses, the line people, the receivers, the running backs, the quarterbacks. I mean, there's a lot of variations in there that you don't get in other sports. You could compare to pretty much anything. When you look at wrestling or you look at tennis and you look at basically the kids are all doing the exact same thing. There's no variation in it. Like if you're doing a cradle in wrestling, everybody's doing a cradle. You're not, it doesn't matter if you're 106 or you're the 215 or whatever it happens to be, they're all doing it the exact same way. In football, there's a lot of variation in the offensive line, the receiving core, the running backs, defensive backs, linebackers. There's a lot of variation in it. Does it justify 5 coaches for, 25, 26, 28 kids, whatever we have? That's another story, but we don't intend to stay at that level forever.
Right.
So, as far as I'm concerned, we're looking to put 60 kids on the field. And when that happens, it's next year, the year after, that's what we intend to do. So that's where we're headed right now.
Mr. Manley, if I could just add, Mr. Glassberg, Mr. Lifton, good questions. In fact, that exact question was discussed in the athletic committee, and I think we'll probably get a report from Mr. Suss around that. And just to echo something that Mr. Cathcart said earlier, we are definitely, at all costs, want to maintain opportunities for our student athletes to participate. Certainly, reducing a coach wouldn't reduce the ability for our student athletes to participate. So we're going to watch that number very, very closely going forward. It's just awfully hard to tell. There's a lot of moving parts right now, but the athletic committee brought up a lot of good points, and we're watching that number very closely. And if we're able to keep the program, that's my number one priority. If we can't keep the number of coaches in that priority, that's just a byproduct of the number of athletes. And if in a good couple of years, what Mr. Cathcart hopes for, that we're back high numbers, then we'd look to add positions back at that time if we needed to. So we're trying to stay as realistic as possible, but also be flexible as we get new information and better data going forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Suss?
Just one point I think Mr. Cathcart didn't mention is that the athletics budget is up 2.14, only to 2.14% over last year. Assuming, Mr. Small, that number is correct.
Thank you. I think we'll end there.
Thank you, Mr. Cathcart. Next will be curriculum. Mr. Cohen.
So good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to present the proposed curriculum budget for 2019-2020. And so just a quick overview in the sense that I should start off by saying, I just want to clarify that the budget that you were sent on Friday, I think there was a technical error in some of the copying, so may have been given the wrong file in the packet. So for curriculum, instead of looking at the packet in handout 4, Carolyn did us a favor of providing a single sheet copy of the curriculum budget. This would be the more accurate reflection and would pair with the document sent out in the Friday packet on Friday. So this would be the better reference. I'll talk a little bit more about it in general, and then we can make reference to that if needed. Essentially, there are 3 main components of the curriculum budget. There is curriculum writing or development, and that is down almost $30,000 from last year's budget. There are curriculum supplies, which is down approximately $5,000, and then there's PD and subscriptions, which is up just over $21,000, overall, the curriculum budget is down from last year by 15%. So that's the good news.
Sorry, Mr. Cohen, 15%, 1.5?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't hear you. Thanks.
I'm going to go over a little bit of the highlights and the differences in the costs quickly. First and foremost, in the curriculum writing, the big highlight is that all of our core content curriculum documents are now aligned to the most recent New Jersey Student Learning Standards. That's a major accomplishment. I want to thank the board for their support over the last 7 years. This is the first time in my 7 years here that we are able to say that, where all of our teachers have high-quality curriculum aligned to the most recent standards, and we are CUSAC aligned as well. And some of the lessons that we've learned in the process in getting to that point is that engaging teachers in curriculum mapping, we've seen, is one of the most important activities that lead to some of the highest quality curriculum documents and teacher fidelity to curriculum. It's a really huge piece. We can write some great curriculum. Of course, what really drives curriculum is teacher fidelity and implementing that in the classroom. And so in this budget is a proposal for our social studies staff to engage in some collaborative curriculum mapping. They've done some great work this year under the leadership of Derek Kuja in terms of getting our staff to infuse a lot more authentic research into the social studies curriculum, as well as embedding social emotional learning through a pilot that we've been working with Dr. Maurice Elias and his STAT program. Deanne Opatowski has done a lot of PD ongoing with the social studies staff in terms of how do you infuse reading and writing in meaningful ways and research into social studies. And so we feel that collaborative mapping would really lead towards, fusing that, getting the staff fidelity towards that, giving them a resource and a guide, so that in a year or two, when the standards for social studies are changed, we'll have a higher quality curriculum document at that time. Also, there's funds for, there was an unfunded mandate from the NJDOE requiring financial literacy in grades 6 through 8. The good news about that is that in talking with the county and the state about how do we meet that mandate without additional staffing, they said that it is okay to infuse or integrate financial literacy into already existing curriculum. And so in talking with our staff, we talked about how infusing financial literacy into our math curriculum is a great opportunity to make some of the math that our students are learning in grades 6, 7, and 8 more meaningful by applying it to real-world finances. So there's some funding for doing some of the mapping of that for this summer. In terms of highlights and different costs for the curriculum supplies, highlight for curriculum supplies is that all principals and school budgets now support benchmarking. We began benchmarking many years ago and started with the curriculum supply account supporting initiatives in benchmarking, starting with first at Edgar, then the next year at Campbell, then the high school and Moss. We're now at K-10 sort of school-supported benchmarking, so it kind of did free up some money or supplies in there. The proposal, the difference in cost this year would be the hope to continue to provide the online cell assessment tool called Quest. We've been working on a grant from the U.S. Department of Education for the last 3 years. They provided us a high-quality cell online tool, Quest. It's been in pilot phase. The first couple years, they admittedly said, we're not ready to go to scale. We'd like to use districts to try these out, give us feedback on the quality. We're now going into our third year. I can say that the quality this third year is excellent, but I do want to share the results now that they're more valid with the curriculum committee as well to get their feedback. And then last, in terms of highlights and different costs for the PD and subscriptions, with the successes and the highlight of our success with benchmarking, we now are doing best practices in terms of getting data. What we want to do now is move towards widespread best practices in using data. One of the best practices in getting staff to use data effectively is through teacher leaders, where you have teacher-led data teams. So we built in some summer work for some of our teachers that are already doing a great job with their data Can we get them some PD and some time to work to prepare to lead other teachers in best uses in data? Also, we've had some, great successes in identifying some really good providers in PD for social emotional learning. Staff have been able to get access and go to a lot of workshops. We want to bring some of those really high quality social emotional learning PD providers in district for our in-services. And also wanted to highlight Activate is a pilot that we want to try this year. It has to do with a dynamic online PD tool. It kind of would be a way in which to say, can we mesh some hybrid learning for the adults in our district? It is a very, very cost-effective way in which to provide some self-directed, customized, job-connected in-district PD. The subscription is $30 per person. So to be able to do some really rich PD in an individualized way or in groups or really sort of self-directed manner, it's exciting. So we want to try to see if we can pilot that and maybe bring in a resource to the district that could increase the quality of the PD offerings that we have, diversify that, but also do it in a very cost-effective way. So, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Ms. Clean? Mrs. Clean, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Just one question that's popping out to me at first. Can you please help me appreciate the difference between the money attached to is the frontline teacher evaluation for Strong, is that just what we're paying for the evaluation system itself?
So Frontline as of right now, has an increase of about 40% from their charges from previous years. According to Frontline's invoice, and I've talked to one person about this and said that's accurate, so I'm going to try to go higher up. I haven't gotten a response yet. They've separated out. What we used to get from MLP was one bill, and it covered the PD component as well as the evaluation component. With Frontline, there's a PD component, and there's two components for eval. There's their eval component, and then which has a charge, and then there's the Strong component, which has an additional charge. So there is an increase in the charge and the amount that we pay to have access to the system for PD and for what used to be Oasis, which is now Strong on Frontline.
And so just as a little background, 3 of the systems that we use, IEP Direct, and then My Learning Plan and Oasis and AppleTrack, so it's 3 separate systems, have all in the last several years been purchased by Frontline. So now our bills are coming from Frontline, and they've kind of increased their monopoly on the field. So we haven't changed, but since our products have gotten purchased by Frontline, we're seeing a bit of an increase in that area.
Do we use ASAP through Frontline too?
We don't. If we did use ASAP, we would have seen another increase too, because ASAP was also purchased by Frontline. We have Judy Kay, our sub-caller. We don't use an ASAP-like program.
Gotcha. So with the professional development component, I mean, it's roughly 50-50, right? So what kind of professional is that the mandated professional, or what are we getting for that?
So there's good news and bad news with what we're doing. So we started, when we came into district, Dr. Caputo, all the requests for professional development and all the costs involved and all that went behind staff going for PD was all done on paper. And it was left a long paper trail, and things would get lost, and it was hard to coordinate, it was hard to document, it was hard to measure the effectiveness, it was hard to communicate. So we moved all of that onto an online system for professional development, where any FIPE request would go through online, all events could be logged, hours could be logged. There was a direct link between professional development and growth opportunities to the evaluation system. So that's what MLP offered. And then when we started to move towards the Strong evaluation system, MLP had absorbed Strong, and we were able to do the two together and linked. The bad news, well, the good news is like it was a good system. It was so marketable or so effective that Frontline purchased it. The bad news is it looks like that's coming with an increased cost.
So I think my follow-up to that would be maybe that'd be a great conversation for curriculum to kind of look at that a little bit. benefit, just so we can appreciate that a little bit better
Sure.
and understand the costs associated?
Sure, if you have room in your agenda, we can pull it up and we can show you the back end, what it looks like when teachers apply and how it tracks the hours, and sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brenderly?
So kind of on this, maybe on the same, in the same area, you talked about the Quest and the cell and the assessment. I know that we've had that grant, and actually you reminded me that I guess we're in our third year. I guess my request from a curriculum committee is before we go and commit to paying for it in the fourth year, I think we'd like to see kind of what the results of that pilot works. I don't think we ever have had a presentation of what that looked like. I remember when we contemplated it and we talked about it and and looked at all the various different tools, and we were very happy that we were able to get this grant for that program. But there were at the time a lot of questions about the program and you know, how accurate it was and self-reporting, and I'd like to see kind of what that program actually ended up looking like.
Yeah, Mr. Cohen, I think, said that he's looking forward to sharing some of that data with curriculum, but yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, and in all honesty, I can understand the perception of sometimes the cart seems to maybe be put before the horse when it comes to budgeting, which I understand in the sense that, you know, pilots kind of work that way, where you start a pilot and the results, you know, the timeliness of the results are not always coinciding with the budget process. In the case of the online Quest tool that has been for free, I would say the last 2 years, I wouldn't want anyone to see it really. I don't think that the quality of the product was where it needed to be. This year, though,
I guess that's why we haven't seen it.
yeah, it wouldn't be one that I would have spent money on. This is the first, so it's still free this year. Just Wednesday, I had a long conversation with the researcher behind it, and they've been taking a lot of suggestions on how to enhance the tool. I actually feel really, really excited about this survey that they now have put together and its alignment with what we're doing and its ability to give us valuable feedback on if our curriculum, which embeds CEL, is actually seeing results. But again, we haven't administered that survey yet. We always administer that survey in June. It takes about 30 minutes. The kids really enjoy it. It's gamified. So the kids have a great experience, but it's easy to administer. The results just really haven't been as valuable. This would be the first year where I'd say the results should impress the committee. If they don't, we wouldn't move forward with it. But I think this would be the first time that it actually might impress the committee.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Derflinger?
Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for your report. You mentioned that part of the effectiveness of curriculum mapping was teacher fidelity. I imagine that curriculum mapping is now part of lesson planning. Is there an online platform that you guys are using that actually takes all of that data from the curriculum mapping where teachers can access it easily to apply to their lesson planning? Has there been any feedback from the teacher community about supports that they need in that regards to all of these new implementations to help them better do their jobs?
So right now we're currently using OnCourse. So curriculum maps, and curriculum maps are more outlines in terms of what are the key learnings that need to occur. I would say on a lesson design or lesson planning process, teachers are more using the curriculum guide that has a little bit more of a breakdown and more of the specifics in the curriculum guide. And curriculum maps often lead to really fleshing out the details further in a curriculum document. However, curriculum maps and curriculum guides are put up on OnCourse, and so teachers have a one-stop shop for, okay, when I'm lesson planning, my standards come from the curriculum guide. But let me take a look back. Let me do some more long-term planning. They could take a look at the curriculum map and get another sort of view of where they're headed. Whereas the units are really, really logged in with or filled up with a lot of detail. So I think the curriculum map often helps people kind of take a step back and say, okay, what are the long-term goals that we're trying to achieve here? And both are up on OnCourse so they can access it once they're on the system.
Mr. Cohen, traditionally we've done maps in first years or new programs.
Yeah, so anytime we have a new course, we've had the practice now for the last 5 years where the teacher, the summer before starting the course, will write the map first. And that's what say, okay, what are the overarching goals of this course? Let me outline and make a bit of a roadmap.
And the purpose of that is to align new programs to the written curricula based on the standards, right? So like iReady was a new program for math, correct, this year?
So iReady is a new textbook.
Textbook,
Yes.
okay. So
I'm sorry, iReady is the benchmarking, Ready is the textbook.
Okay, so the Ready program, I'm sure it was sold to the district as, standard aligned, da-da-da-da. That didn't require teachers to completely revamp the curriculum map, right? That was already established. The program is just facilitating that process?
So curriculum map, so in math, for example, there are teachers K-5 who did maps for problem solving, for example. So problem solving was a long-term goal that we wanted to really be able to more effectively teach the students across the year. And our NJS data and our PARC data still tell us our students have been struggling with multi-step problem solving. So I'd say a year or two ago, we did a lot of mapping of problem solving. And then last year or two, we did the curriculum revision for math to the new standards. And then we got ready. And from a practice standpoint, that's good practice because you don't want the textbook to drive your curriculum. And Ready has really been a great match for our curriculum and our map that already exists. Our map that we created for math was problem-solving steps and questions to guide, self-questions for students to guide their thinking through the multiple steps of a problem. And then Ready has a problem-solving process and self-questions to guide students through discussion of math problem. It creates this discourse about math where kids can really talk about their thinking and find a lot of different ways to solve problems. So it fit really well with what our map and what our curriculum was already asking the kids to do. And it adds a really nice supplement for the teachers to facilitate that process in the classroom. Okay. But yes, it does take a process of saying, okay, these are what our materials are, this is what our curriculum is, where's the match, and how do we make both work together?
So has the program Ready increased teacher fidelity, or do you feel like there's been some hiccups along the way?
Yeah, so the teachers were the ones who selected Ready. Okay. I personally could not have been happier with that selection because I had been on the side telling teachers the whole time that if we want to teach students to be able to think through multiple steps of a complex math problem, we need to help them structure their thinking and guide their thinking step by step. And so structured self-questioning became a new metacognitive strategy that I had learned from Dr. Grant Wiggins and Dr. Elias. And maybe I sounded like... Oh, sorry, what?
UBD, Understanding by Design.
Well, no, this is sort of so I talked with Dr. Wiggins about it, and this was the opposite of UBD. Not to get into that for tonight. But in short, there was this new strategy.
It's early, come on.
I'm ready for this to... No, go ahead.
Dr. Caputo said I had 5 minutes. In short, we're basically saying there's this new strategy. It's like structured self-questions. And then Ready had structured self-questioning as part of their programming as well. So when I saw what Ready had to offer and what we were already trying to do, I was like, wow, this couldn't have worked out better. I do think because they are also practicing structured self-questioning, it did increase teacher fidelity to our maps and our curriculum because the match was so strong.
Thank you.
Mr. Glassberg?
2 questions. First, the curriculum development, as you said, it went down versus last year, and now you're saying that we're fully aligned with the New Jersey curriculum standards. So is there anything on here that you have that we do not need to be doing this summer, or all of these things need to occur, all of these curriculum developments?
So aside from the mapping, in social studies and in financial literacy, there are some curriculum documents that were written by the supervisor in science in order to be aligned, and they were not written locally by our teachers. But because we value so much the collaborative curriculum writing process as both good for our students to have this great curriculum, also a great PD opportunity for our teachers. We still want to go back to those courses in science and see if we can get our teachers to write those curriculum.
So
And
they
then
were
in
writ-
the, oh, sorry,
So they were written by the
by Kathleen Henn, and we're not paid. So,
Right, so they were written last summer, and now we would like them to be rewritten by the teachers.
yeah, we want to engage
in
the
their
teachers.
in their entirety, or is there just modifications to make?
So, yes, I mean, they were written by the supervisor, but I do think that you still want the teachers to go through the entire document and build in the pieces that they feel are reflective of what they're going to be doing in their classroom. What Kathleen Henn did with all these documents was get something that was going to be compliant, but I don't think it represents the level of detail that teachers would do, the kind of curriculum guide that we want to have up on OnCourse.
All right, but it's the same, and I know I think I had the same question last year, but so it's the same amount of money whether we have an existing document written by a supervisor or we have no document that we're starting with whatsoever. It would be the $1,300 per course.
Yeah, I mean, I would just give the blanket statement that we essentially never write a curriculum document on a blank document. Every curriculum is a revision. Whether it was from 2004,
Right.
whether it was from 2009, whether it was from another district, whether it's from, a lot driven by the textbook. There's a lot of resources that are used and brought together to build the curriculum. You always want what the teachers see as best practices to have an opportunity to get into every part of that unit.
Okay. And the same would apply to all the others listed here that you would feel like they would need to be done, the social studies 1 through 8, and sociology and U.S. history.
So all the social studies documents are maps. And
Okay, because the financial literacy says map, but I didn't.
Oh, so you're right. It doesn't say map there. So the 760 represents 2 teachers mapping in social studies, and then the Holocaust and Genocide are actually new courses, which are our semester courses. And then the financial literacy, we're hoping to engage Sandy Varensky in that work to infuse where financial literacy meets the standards. And then the practical arts, the practical arts courses have been mapped, but have not had Metuchen people write curriculum.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I know there's other questions, but I'm going to jump in with a quick one of my own, because we were there. The AP micro and macroeconomics were recently introduced, like 2-3 years ago. We already need to redo the curriculum for those?
So we haven't written curriculum for those
Okay.
yet. Only one of those is going to be given next year, but it usually is better practice if we write the 2 at the same time.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Did you go yet? Mr. Benderly? Sorry.
I don't know. Just a comment on the science curriculum. I remember them last year when we approved them, and I remember that I actually had a lot of questions about them, and there were things in there that didn't kind of make sense to me. It referred sometimes to the new standards and sometimes to the old standards, and I remember having a discussion with that at the time, and you gave the same answer. We need to do this now. We kind of did a quick once over on them so that we're QSAC compliant, but that we're going to write them for real next year. So at least from my perspective, it's consistent from what we heard last year.
Thank you. Mr. Suss?
Yeah, just 2 questions. So in terms of the subscriptions to Activate, you said that's a pilot?
Yes.
Isn't 110 licenses a lot for a pilot?
Yes, it's we like to have high expectations. In talking with Dr. Caputo, we said, well, where are some of the inroads for us to be able to try to pilot this? And we started, recognizing that there's opportunities for our new teachers. We have year 1, year 2, year 3 programming for our new teachers, so this may be a great way to incorporate that at the very least in our year 3 programming. for our first-year teachers during our August in-service days as a resource. This is a great tool for principals who identify any staff member with a particular need for growth. So it could be prescribed to a number of people throughout the year, sort of on the spot. We hope. We do collaborative teacher inquiries as part of our in-service days. We don't have a maximum amount of time on in-service days to do in-depth research, but we do want to expose staff to this as a resource if they want to continue doing some in-depth research on a particular area that they're working on. And I think we would really go subscription by user as opposed to buying all the subscriptions and then trying to divvy them out. We'll see which people are going to be interested. We'll get them the subscriptions and we'll get them started.
So we don't have to buy them all at one shot?
Correct.
So another question, I'm just, again, this was a while ago, just trying to catch up. So your presentation is broken up into a number of sections: curriculum writing, curriculum supplies, and PD. And you talked about increases and decreases in cost. So curriculum writing is $23,480, and you're saying that went down $5,000?
No, that was about 30,000.
That went down 30. Supplies?
Down about 5,000.
5K, and the PD went up 21K?
Yes.
And like I said, because we don't have this year versus last year, the increase, the 21K, is there anything that jumps out here where, what were the big ticket items?
Yeah, I can go by like real quick item on the list there to show where the difference would be. So essentially, if you look at the first item where it's central office administration staff, in the past that was a $4,000 item. It's now $7,000. The reason being that our supervisors, this would be an increase of our supervisors' PD line going from 500 to 1,000. They often go above 500 in reality, and teachers are entitled up to $1,000 on FIPE. I get $1,000 in PD, and we wanted to make it equitable. And we want to invest in their learning and their growth. They do a great job in turnkeying what they get. So that's one item. The state mandated PD went up 1,000. We usually only cover CPS. It should say CPR. Dyslexia we've been doing really with resources available. We do dyslexia training as required by the NJDWE every year. This year we want to bring an outside expert in to mix it up. We have the Activate, which is new. The teacher leaders for the summer work is new. We want to engage our teachers as leaders of data. The cell training is a new item. And then there's an increase in frontline.
Okay, and last but not least, my two favorite questions. What would you add? What would you subtract?
So I thought a lot about this question, anticipating it. And
Thank
what
you.
I would say.
Dr. Herzog smiling in the back.
I'm going to use
We're
that
gonna have to come
segue,
with a new
Dr.
question.
Herzog. So Dr. Herzog did an incredible job talking about the challenges that mental health can face for schools, and has a great proposal about what schools can do to meet those challenges. And I'm a huge support of the work that she's looking into and the research she's doing, and I pledged to do whatever I can to help bring some really, really good adults and professionals and to provide therapy to students. Having said that, I know firsthand some of the challenges that our staff are currently facing in dealing with some of the mental health challenges that today's world provides our staff. And I can only use this as an opportunity to say it honestly and sort of advocate for my staff who have said if they could have one resource that would most help them address some of the mental health challenges that they see on a daily basis. They would love, so let me qualify this statement. I would increase the PD, and the PD that I would love to put in there would be the ability for us to support our staff who already have custody of dogs that they feel would serve well as either as therapy dogs or comfort dogs. If we could tap into those as resources, I think it'd be a very minimal investment to pay for the staff to go get their dog trained as a therapy dog, but that's putting the cart before the horse. For good reason, this was not included in here because we don't have a policy. And so I've learned it's not appropriate to put stuff in the budget before the policy is there. What I would, if I had to take anything away, Quest is still an unknown, so the Quest would be the first thing I would say we would have to take out.
Thank you.
I will send out the line item budget tomorrow with the comparison. I forgot to include that in the packet. I apologize for that.
Thank you. That was
Thank you.
That was the one comment I was going to make, so I appreciate that. See no other questions. I think we're done with budget presentations. Thank you very much, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Cohen.
Mr.
We
Cohen.
do have one much more shorter one
Did I skip
that I'll
one?
give today.
Co-curricular?
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
co-curricular, and it's handout numbers 8. Yeah, handout number 8 in your packet. So what we've done, because I don't ask the principals until June for a report on which clubs ran this year and which clubs they're recommending for next year, what I've included in handout 8 for comparison are the stipends. So first on the first handout 8 page are the high school co-curricular 18-19 and budgeted 19-20 stipends. No changes to the actual offerings. At the bottom of that page, halfway down, begins the high school clubs. The clubs that are budgeted this year the actual clubs this year and the budget amounts for those same clubs next year, assuming that the high school principal recommends that the same clubs run. Total for the high school co-curricular clubs at the bottom. Next handout, page 8, are the Edgar clubs. Same thing, 18-19 actual and 19-20 budget. Total clubs, and then about 3/4 of the way down, the Edgar intramurals. Last year, the current year rather, and next year's projected budget amount, again with totals on the bottom. And the third page on the co-curricular are the Campbell clubs, again listed assuming that Mr. Prowski will recommend the same clubs running in 18-19 and what that would cost to run that same club for 19-20. Overall, that's an increase of $46.72 or 2.38% increase over 18-19.
If you don't mind making a comment, as part of the extracurricular committee minutes, you can see the participation in the clubs for the 17-18 school year. It's in the minutes that's been posted. And also, I think this doesn't include the academic competitions.
That's correct.
And that's also in the extracurricular committee minutes.
It is.
For those people that want to take a look at that. And that money, and again, Mr. Harvey, Dr. Caputo, correct me if I'm wrong, that comes out of some of the principal discretionary budgets?
That's correct.
Line items? Yeah.
There were 3 notifications that came out of schoolboard.net on the extracurricular minutes. The first one had a whole bunch of documents. You couldn't really tell what was there. I didn't read the last 2, but you might want to follow up. Just make sure the whole board knows. There were 3 parts. I know you said see attachment.
Right.
When you went back to the notification that we got out of school board, there was literally like 15 things listed there. So it just might be a bug, but
Right.
we might want to just send those out separately to the board.
I think per previous agreement in September, I think we were going to create one event and put all the documents into the one event. I don't think that happened for this particular thing.
It may not have. No,
Yeah.
it looked strange.
When I went into schoolboard.net, they were actually separate documents in there.
Yeah, so it may have corrected itself. I saw while I was driving home subsequent emails, but I didn't mention.
Driving and looking at emails.
It was popping up. I didn't, my hands and eyes were on the wheel. Okay,
One-
we're done.
Sorry, one
Question.
quick
Go ahead.
question on the co-curriculars. Dr. Caputo, these are all the salaries for all the clubs and everything, but are there any other costs for materials or supplies for any of the clubs that are coming out of different locations or anything like that?
Very minor if there are.
Okay, and where did that come out of school-based budgets or?
Yep.
The student activity funds,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, thank you.
Or the school-based budget in some cases.
Thank you.
I guess the one exception to that is probably transportation for the band.
Right.
Right, that probably is significant.
Transportation.
That's significant, yeah. The
That comes out,
extra,
where does that come out of?
Transportation.
Transportation budget. Is it a separate line item in the transportation budget?
no.
Any other questions before I close this portion of the meeting? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports. President's report. I just have one brief thing to say. We're anticipating getting our state aid numbers on Friday, March 8th, right, Mr. Harvey? I did want to note for those who may not have had an opportunity to see it, and of course my iPad is not working right now, but Governor Murphy gave his budget speech today, though, and in it, he indicated ramping up $206 million to ramp up to the full K through 12 formula. For those who do not know, Metuchen has always been funded below what the formula says we should. We saw an increase last year. 206 is, again, on the ramp, so it's not all the way there, but it is. He did propose an increase statewide of about $206 million. How much of that Metuchen may or may not get, we'll know on Friday, but at least it's a positive first indication. So, and that concludes my report. So, Dr. Caputo, are you next?
Yes, no report tonight.
That was too fast. Mr. Harvey.
No report.
Thank you. Committee reports. Mrs. Clean, why don't we start with curriculum, because I know you have minutes.
So curriculum had a pretty long meeting to start off the long night of meetings. On the 26th, we talked about, we had some guest speakers from the district. Ms. Kirshner, Ms. Chung, and Ms. Paredes were all there. They talked to us about the SECD committee. Lots of new staff interest. Was exciting to hear about. Ms. Chung was explaining the good work that she's doing with the teachers and the interest that it's generating primarily among Campbell School teachers, but different things that the teachers can do, best practices, activities, and resources that they can employ to promote social emotional learning skills and friendship, community building with the students. So that was nice to hear the teacher interest growing there. We talked about the therapy dog, really appreciating there's actually a proposal was for two different dogs, one at Metuchen High School in a self-contained class and one for Moss to be shared school-wide. There were fewer concerns with the therapy dog, the proposal for Metuchen High School, because of the difference in the assignment. They'd be contained in one classroom and really interacting with a finite group of students, whereas the plan for Moss School would be that the dog would serve as school-wide, visiting all classrooms, that kind of thing. And so because our concerns with logistics and finance were pretty significant, we are eager to have further discussion in curriculum, but also hear what policy and finance have to say about that before any recommendations are made. So I know that's a hot topic. We looked at SGP data. We talked about subgroup performance. We are going to continue looking at subgroup performance, maybe students that didn't meet benchmarks moving forward. There's a lot of interest there, and we're very thankful that administration is going through that with us so we can better appreciate what's going on in our schools to address those needs. We had talked about the Peace Squad, the funding. There was a request for a significant amount of funding to run the Peace Squad. It was going to come to the tune of about $12,000, and it's been funded up through Title I up until this point. It would be grades through sixth grade ones, but the committee felt that because of the budget situation that we're currently facing or projecting, that it's not appropriate to propose that support that kind of expenditure at this point. And then the last thing we just talked about was the consideration of Physics C as opposed to Physics 2, or AP Physics 2. And after a somewhat quick discussion, because the night was getting long, we kind of discussed not for this year, but possible in subsequent years because of the program of studies is already out. We'd have to get teachers trained. There's some other costs involved, curriculum writing and whatnot. So more to come on that down the road. So we have, long story short, no recommendations at this time.
Thank you for the detailed minutes, though. Appreciate it. Mr. Glassberg, policy?
All right, after the 2-hour and 8-minute curriculum meeting, then
Not that you were timing it.
Policy was allotted 45 minutes after that. And we met on February 26th, and a bulk of our time was taken up with some mandatory policies. So you'll see the first readings for those. There was a conversation about some of them, including the use of Narcan for opioids, transgender policy, admitting F1 visa students. Those were all mandatory updates. We recommend approving all of the mandatory updates that we have to have. And we recommended allowing F1 visa students to attend school with tuition, which is one of the offerings in the policy where we had a choice to make there. We also considered the therapy dog policy and whether there should be one, what it might look like, and it's one of the many things. It's kind of ironic because of the length of the curriculum committee that the policy is now assigned homework between policy meetings, so we might need to take that up in a homework conversation. But we are...
There's a homework policy.
Time talking about homework policy.
Talking about homework policy, and there they are assigning homework. So between meetings, we're bouncing ideas off of each other about if we were to have a policy related to the therapy dog, what that would look like. And that's not an endorsement of having a therapy dog or not. It's just our committee looking at its task of what the policy could be. We also very briefly mentioned again the heat policy or potential heat policy. So again, we are going to spend some time coming up with ideas of how that might look if there were to be one, and we'll allocate some time at the next meeting to talk more about that, to see if we could have any sort of a consensus or at least get the ball rolling on that. We talked very briefly about a security director job description. Mr. Manley tasked us to take a look at that, and that's also going to be considered more between meetings, and then we'll come back at our next meeting to see whether we've made any progress there. And we had an update from Susan Paredes joined us from the District Policy Committee, and she gave us her feedback, her committee's feedback on issues related to the mandatory policies that we had to update, as well as to the grading policy. The committee thanks her for attending. We look forward to having her back. I apologize if you're out there listening, Ms. Paredes, that we had to cut you short in order to move on to some of the other topics, but we would like you to come back and share more of the thoughts of the district committee. So we're suggesting the approval of first reading of the mandatory policies, and then we're going to get back to you on the security director job description, a theoretical heat policy, and the therapy dog.
Thank you. It should be noted, I did warn you that it was probably not going to get in there, so I thank you for taking it up.
We did the best we could with our time.
Yeah, exactly. I have questions on some of that, but I'm just going to hold off. We'll do all the reports and then go back to questions.
Okay.
So, Mr. Suss, extracurricular?
Like New Jersey Transit, extracurricular started really late because it was after policy and curriculum. We got an update on the coaching vacancies. There were 4. You'll see the recommendations for tonight. The head football coach is still open. We got a winter sports recap, and I won't ruin the surprise, but you'll see a number of the successes at the Showcase of Success at the 319 meeting. We got a spring sports preview. That's an attachment. We discussed middle school lacrosse. Given the lack of field space, the lack of middle school teams in the GMC, and the lack of money, it's not recommended at this time. We reviewed the club participation report for 17-18. That's an attachment. We reviewed the budget for academic competitions, which is also in the attachment of the minutes. We got a preview of the 1920 athletics budget, which we went over tonight. A lot of time was spent discussing the lack of funding for ice hockey, which, as was noted, was not recommended at this time. Also, we talked about the expenditure per athlete for football and the number of coaches, and talk a little bit about that in a second. And one other thing we noted was the band camp dates for this year were moved to later in the month of August, and Mr. Cathcart is going to see if there's conflicts with preseason for sports. Just a couple other things Mr. Cathcart's going to follow up on. He alluded to tonight already was we asked him to follow up on the number of football coaches per team for the teams in the GMC Blue Division. It sounds like 5 is the magic number. We also asked him to talk to the Edison School District to find out what the trigger point was for the Edison School District paying for ice hockey. That is pretty much... That's pretty much it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Small, I know Finance and Technology has not met, so I'll just say that for you. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Human Relations Commission meets on the 12th.
Okay.
Finance Tech on the 14th.
Yep, thank you, sir. Facilities has not met. It is going to meet on the 11th at 7 p.m. at Edgar School. That meeting is open to the public. It is an hour long where we will discuss typical committee things as well as the long-term future needs of Edgar School. In attendance will be not only the committee and the administration as well as the principal of Edgar School and a teacher representative as well.
Ms. Gouveia is going to be
Starts
there.
at
I got
7.
notice today.
Okay, great. Yeah,
It
it starts at 7 p.m.
7 o'clock.
Yeah, there is a PTO meeting, I think that starts at 7:30.
Did they?
I think they moved it back so that
Did they move
could-
it back and move it to 8?
I'm not exactly sure, but,
We'll talk.
okay.
Do you have an answer?
I don't have an answer, no. I have not got one from Leah, so.
Okay. I know, are there any other assignments? I knew there was one, at least, so, Mrs. Cook?
I do, yes. On February 22nd, I attended the Education Services Commission of New Jersey's monthly board meeting. A couple of topics came up. They have a brand-new professional development building that will be completed this summer for use for anyone, especially us as members. If we want to have any large events, it's all new, state-of-the-art. The pictures, the sketches, the progress is amazing. And they are actually now creating an entire program, and I apologize, my voice is going, I've been sick for like 2 weeks, for 21 and over individuals that will actually also hopefully get approval as of April and then start up this fall. So it's an interesting program for people who have aged out of every other special needs program. It's about a 7 to 8 hour day. It'll be housed right in Piscataway, and it's been an interesting process to go back through their records and read about how they came up with the program as we start our 18 to 21. So interesting learning information there. And then finally, we had a great presentation, and I told the policy committee about this a little bit as well, from Dr. Melinda Mangan from the Rutgers Graduate School of Education on transgender students. It was a phenomenal presentation. I have an article I'll circulate to the board as well that she has written. She went through extensive scientific information, facilities needs, concerns, went through not just the policy, but the guidance from the DOE. It was very, very, very enlightening, and she noted that she was available for any district who wanted her to come and speak. So that was it.
Thank you so much. Were there any other assignments or committees that I missed? Okay, seeing none, I want to open up to questions on the committee reports. Okay, I'll go. Mr. Glassberg, on policy, you mentioned that there were choices on the F1 visas. Sorry if I'm putting you on the spot. Do you remember what they were and what we chose?
Well, Mr. Harvier will help, but I'll start. The choice was whether to accept students on an F1 visa with tuition or not to accept students from an F1 visa. Do I have that right?
Right. And we chose to accept it.
And we chose to accept with tuition.
Okay. What's an F1 visa?
An F1 visa.
I'm sorry, I'm
no,
real.
I'm prepared for that. That's
Good.
for students who are visiting, they're wishing to study in the United States. So it's a special type of visa for that purpose.
That's cool. Thank you. I had on the, I wanted to tell you I appreciate the collaborative approach you're taking on the therapy dog policy, and I thought that was innovative and a good way to keep the ball rolling on the homework while you're moving that forward. And then the question I had was on, you mentioned quickly the grading policy. Was that, were we looking at the value of A pluses by chance?
So it's not actually, that's not actually something that we have that decision over. It's not, that's not in our policy.
Okay.
So it's really at the school level.
Yeah.
We asked the district policy, Susan, to look at that. And they're looking at things such as that and the grading bands and how that balances out. So they're going to come back to us with an update at a later time.
Oh, so
because it gets more nuts and bolts than we have at the broader board policy level.
Great, got it. Thank you. So that was something where they were presenting their work to the policy committee.
Right. We asked them to look into it, and then they're reporting back on it. Yes.
Cool. Very collaborative approach. That's great. Were there any other questions? Or anybody get a question? Because I asked that question, Mr. Suss.
Where did the request for looking at the A pluses come from?
Me.
Yeah.
Ah.
I'm glad he admitted it.
There were several.
I wasn't going to point at him, but he has some really good thoughts and points on it. So
yeah, there were several things that have come up from Mr. Benderly and from other members of the committee to at least consider or kind of see what the logic was behind, so that we could understand it better.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I'm going to close that section of the meeting. God bless you. Any new business from the board? Mr. Suss?
You missed an opportunity to say that this was the first meeting where the public comment was right after the showcase of success.
I intentionally ignored it because nobody spoke, so I was embarrassed.
Understood, but there's people in the television audience that may not have realized what just happened.
Yes, I did post it on Facebook earlier today, so yes, you're right. We did have an earlier moment for the public to speak, and there'll be another one coming up shortly. So I appreciate you pointing that out. Thank you. Now I understand the note you wrote yourself. Any old business from the board? Seeing none. I move to approve the minutes of the following meetings. February 19th, 2019 board meeting, February 19th, 2019 special meeting number 1, and special executive meeting number 2. Do I have a second? Mr. Derflinger, thank you. Is that roll call?
Mr. Benderly?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Abstain.
Mr. Derflinger?
Yes.
Mr. Glassberg?
Yes to the board meeting, and I believe it would be special meeting number 1, and abstain on special meeting number 2. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Colleen?
Same as Mr. Glassberg, yes on board meeting and special exec meeting 2, but I abstain on 1. Right?
No,
Back,
you
other way
abstain on
around.
2.
Other way around. Sorry.
They don't want to tell you how to vote, but...
She abstains on the one she was not in attendance of.
That's right.
Which is executive meeting 2.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Lifton?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
Mr. Suss?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open the meeting to the public for any topic discussed up to this point in the meeting, or for comments on the recommendations of superintendent of schools that we're about to do. Seeing none, close that section. And now for the recommendations of the superintendent of schools. Often at times it may appear to members of our audience and those watching at home that the Board of Education takes action with very little comment and in many cases unanimous vote. Before a matter is placed on the agenda at a public meeting, the administration has thoroughly reviewed the matter with the superintendent of schools. If the superintendent is satisfied that the matter is ready to be presented to the Board of Ed, it is then referred to the appropriate board committee. The members of the board committee work with the administration and the superintendent to assure that the members fully understand the matter. When the committee is satisfied with the matter, It is presented to the Board of Education for discussion before any final action is taken. Only then is it is placed on the agenda for action at a public meeting, which we are now about to take. I will read personnel, which is section A. I move to approve personnel number 1, retirement of certificated staff. Move to accept with regret the retirement of Karen Ryder, Moss School teacher, effective July 1, 2019. Number 2, move to approve the mentor stipend adjustment as listed below on the agenda for Jennifer Pasquale. Number 3, move to approve the following 2019 Title I math tutoring program for teachers for an additional stipend per teacher at the contractual rate as listed on the agenda for Danielle Weitzner, Rachel Devano, and Lori Meyer. Move to approve the appointments of the following substitute teachers for the 2018-2019 school year: Rebecca Gilbert, Thomas Pondel, Gregory Sampson. Is it? Move to approve an additional stipend for Deanne Opatowski, an ESSA Balanced Literacy Coach for the 2018-2019 school year using ESSA Title I-A funds through June 2019. Move to rescind and approve the following for Edgar Middle School track coach for the 2018-2019 school year. Rescind Beth McLaughlin. Approve Veronica Arenio. Move to approve the maternity leave of absence end date for Gina Young, Moss Elementary School nurse, from June 6th to June 22nd, 2019. Subsequently, move to approve the leave replacement nurse end date for Na Pham, Moss Elementary School leave replacement nurse, to June 22nd, 2019, at a rate listed per the agenda. Move to rescind and approve the following from Metuchen High School JV baseball coach for the 2018-2019 school year. Rescission of John McDonald and approval of Gregory Sampson as listed at the steps on the agenda. Move to rescind and approve the following from the Metuchen High School girls spring track assistant coach for the 2018-2019 school year. Rescind William Schlavis and approve Michael Spark and approve Alexander Lito per the steps and listed on the agenda. Number 11, move to approve a change in base salary for Jacqueline Reisman from step 1E to step 2E as listed on the agenda effective February 1st, 2019. Move to approve a change in base salary for Skylar Fennell from step 1G to step 3G as listed on the agenda effective February 1st, 2019. And last but not least, but unlucky, number 13, move to approve the appointment of Ann Shukshand as substitute paraprofessional at the rate per listed on the agenda for the 2018-2019 school year. And bless you also. Got a lot of sneezing going. Finance, Mr. Small. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we got to vote on that one, don't we? I'm ready to go. I was moving it with some steam there.
Second.
We have moved to approve. So second, Mrs. Cook.
Mr. Benderly?
Yes.
No, we have to. I'm
It's
sorry.
questions.
Oh, I have to ask for questions or anything.
Okay.
I messed up first, so sorry. Any questions or comments on those?
Mr. Benderly?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Derflinger?
Yes.
Mr. Glassberg?
Yes.
Ms. Colleen?
Yes.
Mr. Lifton?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
Mr. Suss?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. Manley, if I could,
Yes,
before
Mrs.
you move
Ryder.
on, the board just accepted the retirement of Karen Ryder, longtime teacher. Karen's a Moss School kindergarten and special education teacher. Her retirement will be effective July 1 of this year. She spent 22 years in Metuchen. Her original hire date was September 1st, 1996. She earned her bachelor's in special education and elementary education from Wittenberg University in Ohio. Ms. Ryder holds elementary and teacher of the handicap certifications. She had 6 years teaching experience out of state and 2 years in other public schools in New Jersey before deciding to stay home with her family. And in 1996, she came back to education as a paraprofessional at Campbell School. In September of 2001, she transitioned back to full-time teaching at Moss School as the extended day kindergarten teacher. Ms. Ryder has worked with both preschool and kindergarten students at Moss School and is a valuable member of the school team. And we wish Karen a very happy and healthy retirement.
I might add that Mrs. Ryder was also my youth group leader in 1989, 1990, and holds a special place in my heart. I wish her nothing but the best and good luck in her retirement. Thank you for that. So now, Mr. Small, Finance, please.
So before I begin, I want to make sure I have clarity on what the board agreed as it relates to non-personnel sections of the agenda, because it appears that there are inconsistencies. So before Mr. Glassberg reads all 18 policies, I want to know, am I reading everything or just referencing the items?
I think you were just referencing the items.
I don't want to be
that's
the
what I
odd
thought we
man
agreed
out
to.
and
The only
do it
one we-
differently than everyone else.
I thought personnel was the only one we said we would go through, right?
Okay.
Yes, that's what I recall as well.
Yeah, we haven't followed that, though.
Oh, okay.
There's certain ones that I wanted to highlight last time in terms of the mandatory policies. I wasn't planning on it, but
Duly noted.
I'd like to reserve the right to highlight one in the future, perhaps.
Okay, I'd like to move items B1 through B6 as listed on the agenda.
He is so much more efficient than I am. Do I have a second? Mr. Benderly. Any comments or questions? Yeah, Mr. Benderly?
I just want to comment that we are accepting the audit from last year when, if you recall, when the accountants came here and presented, there was some state data that was missing for the completion of the audit. I would like to once again congratulate Mr. Harvier, Mr. Small, and the staff for the phenomenal financial management of the district. It has once again come in as a kind of a perfect score. So thank you.
And I would like to thank you for pointing that out, because I failed to, so thank you.
Mr. Benderly?
Yes.
Was there another comment or question?
Another comment.
Oh.
I was going to ask, I promise I won't go through all 6 of these items,
Sure.
but I was going to ask Dr. Caputo to comment another successful thing about the grant proposal.
Item 4. Yeah, so item number 4 from Mr. Small's list, we're asking the board to approve the grant proposal by Dr. Varensky. She made a grant proposal. We're asking the board to approve that so she can, so we can in fact officially submit that. And we're in with the hopes of that she's going to get this grant. It's a very exciting opportunity for us. And we'll report back to the board if and when that becomes official.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions before We're ready.
Mr. Benderly?
Yes, again.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Durflinger?
Yes.
Mr. Glassberg?
Yes.
Ms. Colleen?
Yes.
Mr. Lifton?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
And Mr. Suss?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Policy, Mr. Glassberg.
Move to approve items C1 through C3, the suspensions report, HIB cases, and the first reading of policies as listed on the agenda.
Do I have a second? Mr. Suss, thank you. Any comments or questions?
Mr. Benderly?
Yes.
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Durflinger?
Yes.
Mr. Glassberg?
Yes.
Ms. Colleen?
Yes.
Mr. Lifton?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
Mr. Suss?
Yes.
Motion carries.
There are no curricular items. And we're back to the open, I'd like to move to meet, I'd like to open the public to the.
Take 3.
On take 2. At this time, I would like to open the meeting to the public for comments on anything you wish to discuss, including my inability to speak.
Am I allowed to comment?
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I was hoping after the cameras
Not at
were
this
off.
time, no.
Yeah. Seeing none, I close that section of the meeting. Mrs. Cook, announcements.
Okay, bear with me, everyone. There's a lot of them tonight. So beginning with tomorrow night, the Metuchen High School Music Department Ensemble here, 7 o'clock p.m. Thursday night, March 7th, the Screenagers documentary has been rescheduled and will be shown here at 8 o'clock p.m. in the auditorium. Friday night at 7 p.m. is the PT Council fundraiser. Come out, hear the commuters. It's a band that's made up of your friends and your neighbors, help raise money for the PTOs at all the school. Monday, March 11th is the Edgar PTO meeting, as was mentioned. Next week is Metuchen High School Spirit Week, and if you want more information, see Mr. Suss. He'll give you this blue flyer. The last day of the second marking period at Campbell is next Tuesday, the 12th. Moss Parent-Teacher Conferences are set for next week, Wednesday through Friday, March 13th to the 15th. There's a college financial aid planning night for 9th to 11th grade parents happening here at the high school on Thursday, March 14th at 7 p.m. Friday, March 15th, there is something for everyone. At Campbell, it's the second grade concert at 9 a.m. for the parent viewing. At the high school on March 15th, it's the Battle of the Classes at 4 p.m. And it is Edgar 5th and 6th grade activity night from 7 and 9 p.m. Again, all those are on Friday, March 15th. Monday, March 18th is the Campbell Moss PTO meeting at Campbell in the library at 7:30 p.m. Edgar parent-teacher conferences are March 18th to 20th, and our next Board of Ed meeting is here at the high school at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, March 19th.
Thank you so much. You're welcome. Appreciate that. At this point, I move for adjournment. Second, Mr. Lifton. All in favor?
Yeah.
Sorry, lost my touch. We're done. Thank you and good night.